In a new interview, Senator Majority Leader Mitch McConnell acknowledges the challenges ahead for Republicans in November, and he sat down with MSNBC's Hugh Hewitt in a wide-ranging interview, beginning with the drama surrounding the Supreme Court nomination.
It was reported that President Trump was upset when then Judge, now Justice Gorsuch, met with you and other colleagues and may have been less than complimentary. Does a nominee owe loyalty to the president once both through this process and once on the bench?
No, I think once the member is confirmed to the Supreme Court, he has an obligation to try to follow the laws as written.
Now, I've got to read to you a tweet from a year ago, actually a few years ago, from 2013. Thanks to all of you who encouraged me to consider filibuster reform. It had to be done. That's from your old colleague, Harry Reid. What do you think your old colleague is thinking in Searchlight, Nevada right now?
Probably not very happy with where we are, but actually, Hugh, you and I have discussed this in the past. The Senate never filibustered judges anyway, even though it was possible. Never did it anyway until George Bush 43 was elected president. So the whole business of filibustering executive branch appointments, whether to the cabinet or to the courts, is a new invention. Who invented it? Chuck Schumer. And so we are now simply back to where we were as a matter of custom for 200 and some odd years down to the 2000 election, which is you don't filibuster nominees on the executive calendar. So I'm comfortable with where we are. That's the way we operated when I first got to the Senate before they started routinely filibustering judges. I think a simple majority is entirely appropriate for the executive calendar, including judges.
Now, the antics we have watched this week, though, have led some to observe that perhaps the body is as polarized as it has ever been. Do you agree with that? Because you've got a lot of years here that relations between the two sides of the aisle are at their nadir.
Well, I think it's the difference between putting on an act in a committee hearing room and how you act on the Senate floor. I think there's no lack of collegiality in the Senate. But what I think you see the Democrats doing is basically a good front, knowing they're going to lose, and trying to convince their left-wing base, which is demanding of them something they can't deliver. They're demanding that they defeat this nominee. That's not going to happen. So the next best thing they can do is put on a good show and put on a good fight. And I think Senator Booker went entirely too far last night.
But ultimate question, is this your legacy, beginning with the decision to hold open the Scalia vacancy because of the death of Justice Scalia through the organization of the appeals and Supreme Court nominee? Is this the most important part of Mitch McConnell's legacy?
I think so. I think it's the most consequential series of things that I've done that have the longest impact on the country. In the legislative process, Hugh, there's not much you can do all by yourself. The one thing the majority leader can do that no one else can do is the schedule, what you will do or what you will not do. I think the decision not to fill the Scalia vacancy was the most consequential decision of my career. And I think the follow-up on that, to not only fill these Supreme Court vacancies, but put in place men and women who believe that the job of the judge is to interpret the law into as many places as we can, particularly at the circuit court level, for as long as we're in the majority, is the most important thing I will have been involved in my career.
I have to agree with that, and I also want to conclude by asking you about the New York Times op-ed, the story of the day that appeared on Wednesday afternoon by an anonymous senior official in the Trump White House. Were you surprised that someone would feel this way and act that way?
Well, the New York Times is putting stories on the front page all the time based on anonymous sources, so I guess this is just the most recent example of it.
Last question. Democrats say that a blue wave is going to result, energized by the Kavanaugh confirmation. The map's pretty good for the Republican side. Do you think a blue wave will result from the Kavanaugh proceedings and confirmation?
Well, we know it's going to be a tricky year. Off-year elections 2 years into the administration have been challenging for the party of the president. We know the wind will be in our face. What we don't know is whether it'll be Category 3, 4, or 5. In the Senate, we're not all up, unlike the House. We have a pretty good map, but they had a pretty good map 2 years ago. I think the elections are going to be close and hard-fought right until the end. I hope when all the votes are counted that we'll still be setting the agenda in the United States Senate for 2 more years and be able to complete this judicial project that we're talking about, which I think has the longest positive impact on the country right of center.
McConnell also touted Republicans' control of the presidency, the House and the Senate, saying it has been